Welcome back to the Intelligent Builder podcast, sponsored by Plutus Agents. Today, I'm joined by Ric Wendlandt, the operations director at Dan Webb Builders and founder of Stomata, a building science consulting firm focused on human health and the built environment. Ric grew up building, went to school for business, started his career as an environmental chemist, and then found a way to bring all that together, now running multi-million-dollar custom home builds in Tahoe, while pushing a vision for homes that actually add healthy years to your life. Ric, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to see you on.
Yeah, of course. Good to see you, man. So could you kind of give us the quick version of your path, right? I know I mentioned a little bit of it, but how did you eventually end up, running operations at Dan Webb Builders and then launching Stomata as well?
Yeah, start from the beginning. Grew up around building and the trades back in the Northeast. Kind of grew up and worked on crews throughout high school, college. Went to school for business, enjoyed business, but actually had a deep passion for environmental science and understanding that aspect. Not of building to begin with, actually. And met the right people when I moved out west. And through that process, got into field chemistry and environmental science. Hazardous materials was my specialty. And that career was brief, a few years. And then I decided to get back into building. And then quickly, the two parts of my brain conformed into this vision that I'm pursuing now, which is combining the two. And I'm also been an athlete my whole life, so I'm a huge nerd when it comes to just understanding longevity processes and how we can optimize our existence, honestly. And Dan and I met 6 years or so ago, maybe a little longer, before as I was starting to get back into it all. And it was pretty quick from there how we got here. Just research, books, and that's kind of the story that brings us up to the topics we'll be discussing, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. So I know early on you were kind of project managing, right? And then you moved into operations. So what did Dan see in you that made him comfortable saying, hey, I want you to run the engine of the company?
I think I just have a natural propensity or a natural ability and intuition for it, to be honest. I always took the business, but I didn't it's kind of like marketing for me, like in the sense that I hate sales unless I'm selling something I love. I don't want to be creative for something I don't believe in. And it's very similar for me when it comes to creating systems for a company. I love building. I have a deep respect for Dan as a builder and just as a human and in the way he operates his company from the get. We both had a very similar vision, what we wanted to give to clients. He has much more experience in the actual building aspect of it all. And, I came back, we created this, in parallel in a lot of senses in terms of the custom construction, high-end residential builds that we're doing in Tahoe now.
Okay, cool.
And I think that's a summary.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So then I know you also mentioned at one point you kind of were running Stomata and Dan Webb Builders in parallel, right? But then now you're pretty much all in on Dan Webb Builders, kind of creating the vehicle that can run without you. So what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so they are completely separate. I just was so lucky to have met Dan all those years ago, and when I explained to him like, hey, I have this separate ambition that I'm going to pursue, and he's like, cool, like pursue it. And those two are separate, but it's just allowed me to really dig into both sides of that, and hopefully one day put them both together, however that it comes together. But being the vice president running the operations for a custom home company, and we've ranged everywhere from 14 plus employees down, and figuring all of that out, figuring out all the processes involved, it takes a lot. So to run completely in parallel is difficult. I've been able to work on the business processes and the vision for Stomata alongside it in my free time, if you will. But my main focus and direction is to make sure we're building the best possible houses for our clients with Dan Webb Builders. And it takes a lot on the back end, a lot of things. I think what's interesting for me that runs parallel is a lot of my passions for building science in particular and creating this vision of becoming a preemptive healthcare practitioner as a builder, the details included in that are details that you don't see to the human eye. Like the vast majority of them aren't that. And it's very similar with business operations. Like a lot of the systems that make all of this run so fluid, that make your ability to bring in big pieces of the puzzle, big team members to the puzzle. People can leave, people can come in, and the whole system continues to have homeostasis, like complete. It all works together. They are very similar in that sense. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I definitely want to dig deeper into Stomata and the vision you see there. And I can see how it's difficult to truly run both in parallel, especially because I know how busy you are with Dan Webb Builders. But putting a little focus on Dan Webb Builders for now. So, for somebody who's never heard of Dan Webb Builders, how do you describe the type of work that you do? You know, the kind of clients you work with, not Tahoe. Is that just like what kind of homes, price points, stuff like that?
Yeah. We're focusing right now, all of our builds are in North Lake Tahoe. We are licensed in California in general, and we're working on our Nevada license currently. We do everything from $2 to $7 million projects currently, with the ability to grow higher than that. And if we have a really good team, we've refined our team down to a specific amount, like very high-end carpenters. Find a workload that we can go below that, I should say, if it's like a nice high-end kitchen remodel and it's only going to take a few months, but it's a gap in our projects. We usually run 2, maybe 3 projects at a time for custom homes ground up. And we do everything from cut the first tree down, put the last little touches of paint on, hand the keys over. So when you're running only 1 to 3 projects, sometimes you will have a client that's like, hey, due to whatever reasons in my life, I need to push this project 6 months. And now all of a sudden you have this space and that's a very large revenue gap. So you have to find a way to fill that without losing this team that you've procured and you know, everyone is on the same page. That's definitely a hurdle that comes into place. But we offer some pretty cool, unique things to the area, which is one that comes to mind immediately is we did this home at the summit of Donner Summit, just above Truckee, California. It's actually in a town called Soda Springs, or Norden, sometimes they call it. The entire lot was very unique. How do I say this? So we took the entire lot of it was a tree lot. The entire lot has been reused. So not a single branch, and that's not true, but not a single tree went to the dump. It didn't leave. They went to our mill. We have a mill we work with. Shout out to Harmon Homes. And we sent everything there for 1x6s to shelves to bench tops and use slabs. We've made this big, beautiful 10-foot table out of this 200-plus-year-old red fir. And then anything else that wasn't good for a mill got left on the lot, chopped up in firewood and used there. So like we have a lot of pride in that aspect. It's a really cool thing we can offer to a client. And it's like to sit in your home that is this beautiful custom home and just look around you and be like, all of this was here when we bought the house. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a really cool thing. I love that aspect. We do a lot of really high end stuff. That's a little general, but yeah, that's a decent synopsis of a couple different things that were unique in that sense, because there's a decent amount of custom home builders up here, but it's tough to make it in the Sierra Mountains.
Yeah, I bet. But that's incredible. That's a really interesting story too. I want to see what that looks like so I can really vision what you were talking about. But I know you work a lot with the systems, right? And you've built up the people in the business in that way. So internally, what do you use as like kind of non-negotiables in how you run a project? Stuff you're not willing to compromise with because it protects the quality and the client trust. Maybe a story similar, like a lesson learned in that respect.
Yeah, it's we don't move forward on a detail unless it's completely ironed out. And what I mean by that is it's a pretty rigorous pre-construction system that we have. So we dig through everything fine tooth comb and make sure we're hitting every single detail before we start. And that just allows us to do exactly what you said, give everybody the best, absolute best, highest quality of everything. And that can be disseminated between the entire team. I became a lead AP in BD plus C a few years back. And what I took from that, I've been able to take some of the systems that lead designed or perfected, I should say, and incorporate that into our day-to-day business. And one of those processes is the integrative process. So we get everybody involved in the project on the same page early. It can be tough because we're in an industry where there's a lot of, I think many industries are like this. People are set in their ways and, hey, this is how we do it. And one of the biggest things in my position have been able to, and something I feel like I'm kind of blessed with, just life gave me this, is I grew up in the trenches of the trades, if you will, but I have a brain that I've always really been pulled into like the really detailed scientific aspects of things. And that's where you find, builders, of course, but you'll find your architects and your engineers. And there's a different spectrum here. There's a different thought processes for each. And in this industry, you'll see a lot of people that maybe there's an engineer that's in his way that he just can't, or an architect, and they don't really know how to talk to the guy that's building, swinging the hammer. But this guy has been a carpenter for decades, and maybe vice versa. He's having a hard time, like, oh, out of whatever, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy, why can't you just do this? And there's a real skill to being able to speak both languages, and that's a big aspect to all of that.
Yeah, definitely. I know that just through speaking with a lot of people in the industry and similar industries, they're, like you're kind of saying, like stuck in their ways. Like adoption of processes and especially technology is super difficult to implement. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of that while, running the operations there. But you talked about how your brain's kind of wired differently in terms of looking into the detail and the science of things. So I want to transition into Stomata. So when you say, human health in a home, what does that actually mean in practical terms? Like, what are the levers you're pulling most throughout the builds that clients don't really see or talk about?
Yeah. Something I'm constantly thinking about is construction to inhabitants. So the whole time there are avenues for exposure is maybe the word, or a process to mitigate that, to not go into that direction. And what I mean by that is like simple stuff as far as air quality and water quality throughout the house, what things are going to be emitting during the build, off-gassing during the build, off-gassing after the build. It's a constant consideration. And those are the simplest ones, but just about everything you can't see, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like all the little things that you wouldn't normally think twice about, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's say Stomata's involved in a project. So what does that look like in terms of like pre-design to someone moving in? What decisions would you influence and where do you have the biggest impact there?
Everything from the tiniest details for controlling the envelope, which a lot of really good builders are doing anyways. And then you could shift into, there are different frameworks and still working it out, but you're reminding me of a couple different things. One, this book I read years ago. Are you familiar with biophilia? So it's essentially like the theory that human beings have this innate biological need to connect to our environment, all natural things. And I'm butchering that a little bit, but that's pretty solid belief and our explanation of it.
I
And
get
I
what you're
think
saying,
that
yeah.
if we can design around that, we're increasing so many different levels from psychology to actual physical health. And these are all measurable. And then there's a really cool, I can send this to you, but there's an NIH paper that they just published recently, maybe like a year ago. And they broke down the DNA structures, which I think is just brilliant. So basically they make the DNA of a house. Like, are you familiar with nucleotide bases of DNA?
I'm not a
Cysteine.
science guy at all.
So it's cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine. I think I'm remember that correctly. And the way that they had this paper broke out, they created a framework. And I know I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent, but this really brings me to what I'm focusing Stomata into. They created this framework, which essentially your C was your characteristics, your G was your guide, your adenine, your A was your action, and then the trigger. So how these things all come together. So they're creating a framework for exactly how create a even more in-depth certification process for what the house will look like in terms of that health for the human, for the person inside of it. So like the home is it's a crude explanation, but I always say this, like we are the parasite and the home is the host. And how do we create the home to give us the most perfect environment? And these things aren't like, we all know that we like this wall, this color. We all, like I want this big window here and this is beautiful here, but how those things are measured are different. And you're probably familiar with like room feel and like feng shui. Like there's these things that you don't quite get. And when you walk into a home, for instance, that is completely airtight, just to the nth degree, and now it's completely controlled. There's this, God, I wish I could remember his name. There's this architect once upon a time. This is another horribly crude example, but he's like, if a baby comes out and it's having a hard time breathing, you don't poke it full of holes. Like you figure out how to fix the lungs, how to control the airways, like how to make everything pure and controlled, I think is the biggest thing. And it's the same concept for a home, which I'm sure with all the builders you spoke to, this is not a new concept, but I think it's, you feel when you walk into a home that's completely tight and then controlled through all of its ventilation. You just feel the difference, and it's tough to explain. But my dream with one thing I'm working on, again, I've had to set Stomata down for quite some time, better part of the last year. And this concept that I have is that we could create some kind of very simple at home test kit that would be measuring light throughout the house, light throughout each room, and these would be within each room, testing quality of air. Like maybe the air in your office is different than the air somewhere else, and you could diagnose that through these processes and figure out, is it the ventilation system? Did I get this under designed by the HVAC system in the beginning that developed my HR schematic and put everything in place? Was that the issue? But you don't really know. Like, I study this stuff all the time, and I can sit in my office, and if the air quality is worse than it is in my bedroom, it would have to be drastic for me to understand that. But in terms of a metric for, if I spent X amount of hours in my office opposed to X amount of hours in my bedroom, and then in 20 years from now, I'm able to say that the quality of my biological environment in my office was degrading my longevity by 0.05% exponentially over all of that time. And I could have just simply twisted a knob and changed the environment in my office to increase that back to equal to my bedroom, for instance. And that added 6 more months of healthy living to my life. It cost me $200 20 years ago. Why wouldn't I do that? And it's a rather simple, it seems complex, but I think that my focus is to figure out how to make that attainable for everyone for a very simple cost and not overly complicated.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting. And I see how excited you are talking about it too. It's really cool. It seems like it's really your calling, your purpose to figure something out, to go with that. And I know data is super important in science. I know I was saying I'm not a science guy. Figuring out how to get that data seems very important, but it also seems like it's an energy kind of thing. Like it's like a feeling, right? It's going to be difficult to track in a way.
Yeah, I think the tracking is getting easier and easier and easier every day. I mean, like, we're living in this age of AI, which is technological explosion. Man, I think of this other book, Technopoly, I read years ago, and it's about how all that comes together. But it is, I think it's just getting easier. That's all I can say. It's tough to know what road to go down next, but Yeah, I am excited. I think it's a way of looking at building that's should be the norm. We 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 do so many things to better our longevity. People take supplements and work out and focus on all these different ways of biohacking. And what about, I think it's healthy building. Did you ever read the book or hear that book, Healthy Building, Healthy Buildings?
No.
It was, I can't remember who wrote it, but the whole concept was creating the built environment to impact human health and performance, and how I think it was more commercial based, where like the investment for the builder to, like, what was the ROI on putting investment into this building to make the people in the building perform better. And the concept was that a healthier building, cleaner air, better light, acoustics that were more pleasing, etc., made people happier, work better, and actually increase the profitability of a company. So there's a different twist on it, but through all those same mechanisms, we can start figuring out how. My dream is that I can create a system that allows people to say, if I live in a house designed by this builder with these details, if I live in it for 30 years based on the current average home's health rating, if you will, I will live an extra 5 years of healthy existence, barring I don't get hit by a bus or any of the things out of our control. And I, I think it's so attainable. I just really do.
Yeah, absolutely. That book sounds very interesting, and it's like a game-changing concept. To have it put into reality would be incredible. I know in order for you to truly be all in on, building that and figuring that out, your goal is to build Dan Webb Builders into an efficient enough company where if you were to step out, it could be run just as efficiently as if you were there. So, what are kind of I guess, bottlenecks, but what are the biggest worries you have now that you're trying to fix so that the company doesn't depend on you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, automating processes so that it doesn't need, like, it's a tough question. It's simple, but it's tough. And I think just creating systems that run on their own. I kind of touched on it in the beginning, but like, for instance, we're losing a team member right now, and there was a time where that would be like, oh man, what do we do? But we have systems in place where I can hand the next guy something and say, this is exactly what you do. And the whole goal, it's kind of funny, like they say, working to put yourself out of business. Some people look at it, or working to like replace your position, I guess. And some people look at it a little bit with a fearful perspective. But I think that that's the ultimate. That's a great way of designing. So like, I design every system that I either define, refine, or create. I'm simply trying to figure out how I can create a system where someone else could do my job and they could take it over tomorrow. I don't want to be in a position where the company couldn't survive without me, because I think that that's a poorly designed company. Um,
Yeah, no, 100%. And that makes a lot of sense. I like the way you answered that question. So, but I want to ask on the opposite end of that question, opposite end of the spectrum, what systems or routines do you have in place or have you put in place that actually keep you from drowning? I know you touched a little bit about it on it there with the person leaving and everything's okay, but any software tools or even AI that's actually seen real leverage in the company and the way you run jobs and stuff?
Not in particular in terms of software. We've tried a few different, we tried House, worked with Buildertrend a little bit. These are great systems, great softwares. But honestly, we've just developed quite a bit through Google Drive, because we are such a small company. Now we have QuickBooks and other admin, such as paychecks, things of that nature, that we utilize to create these systems and then connect all of these. And they're a massive help. Delegating is one of the strongest skills a leader can have, I think. And I mean, that is literally what you do. But delegating correctly, uh, being, what is it? You can't manage what you can't measure. I heard that somewhere. And that's huge. Like, if you can't measure what you're doing, you can't manage it. So really it's just collecting everything you're doing and figuring out that metric. I'm having a tough time answering this, but I can't think of something very specific outside of that. Like we have systems of folders and systems that you go down for each individual position. And that's important because you don't want to overwhelm a guy that doesn't need your lead carpenter. If he loves to do that, that's what he wants to do. He doesn't need to know or even like have at his hands some higher level operational contract. He doesn't, you're trying to, so I guess to bring this full circle from the beginning of that sentence or the beginning of that thought process is delegation is not just, hey, Sam, I need you to go hang that door. It's, Sam, here are all of the information you need to do your job and nothing more. Does that make sense? So creating systems that doesn't allow someone to have more information than's needed, but also having less is hard as well. It's a
Yeah,
balance,
yeah.
that balance.
It's definitely very difficult to sometimes delegate, I guess, from a more entrepreneurial sense because you're afraid of failure. But in terms of like running the company, delegating the way that you said, like supplying them with what they would really need to do it, but not so much where you're still essentially doing the task yourself is important there. If I was understanding correctly. Yeah, in terms of delegation, automation, things like that, how would you paint the picture of long-term success? Say in 2026. I like to say in 12 months from now, but that's essentially just the year 2026. So for someone who's maybe, what am I trying to say here? I would like you to paint the picture of success for both Dan Webb Builders and Stomata. So like, what does that look like for you in the next year?
Yeah, I mean, Dan Webb Builders is just it's easy to answer both of those. Really, it's you're scheduled out for many years. You don't have to worry about landing new jobs. If you lose a job, you have somebody else that steps in place. You're dreaming of being the builder that your track record speaks for itself. You can have a client that says, I just know that I want you to be my builder. Period. You know, budgets are always a conversation, but I think some of the best builders have this ability to just, they have this long track record that's beautiful and they've done right by everyone. They've built everyone. Whether they taking a loss on a project to do it perfect is your duty if you want to be the best. If you really, really want to build the best. Getting through all of that and being in a place where you have clients that are simply saying, when it's done, it's done. And then when it costs what it costs. It's like, it's, it's far more colorful than that. It's not that black and white, I should say. Yeah. I mean, just having a very consistent team, having a very consistent workflow, having that set out for several projects so you can not rest on your laurels or if you will, but being able to refine a perfectly operating company and all of the people in place I think that's success because you're in a position where it's all already going forward. It's all already happening. It's all already set up and in place. And, it's tough for me to say like, you're not ever putting out fires because you're always figuring out new problems. Right. So, but being in a place where you have the ability to like not have to put out fires, that sounds great. It's tough, but
Yeah, no, I bet, of course.
and then Stomata is, I think it's down the road or maybe it's right around the corner. It's tough to say because my main goal is to continue operating Dan Webb Builders and continue building it the way we've been building it. And it's, just keep pushing out. I genuinely love building. I genuinely love a client that calls you a year later and says, I love this house. Like, I'm happy every time I walk in the front door. Like, everyone that comes over is in awe. I want that every time I build something. And they go hand in hand, really, the two companies. And Stomata is just this success for that is that I've accomplished the same sense. How do I say this? I want people to be able to say confidently, yeah, not only can I tell you that based on all of these different metrics, my performance in life has increased because your cognitive performance can increase so quickly based on your environment. I mean, in a matter of days, hours, weeks, months, like depending on how you're measuring that. But I want people to have confidence in that. It's like we have confidence in like, yes, I have a great clean diet. I'm doing all these things that make me feel this way, and I'm doing so much better at work because I figured out how to, fit in my workout schedule. And I want people to feel the same way about their home. Like when I've gotten to a point where people feel like that about their home, I will have succeeded with Stomata.
That's amazing. I love that vision that you have there. I do want to ask one more question, though, that kind of goes along with that in terms of your vision of stomata. So, for another builder or, say, operations leader who's maybe younger, leading older crews, kind of like you are, and thinking about adding a building science or health lens to their craft, to their projects, what's one place you tell them to start?
I mean, we keep coming back around to it, and I think we're coming back around to it because it's just the simplest one for people to understand. But control, figure out how to control the environment, and then go from there. Because if your house isn't controllable, it's not a tight envelope, and then it's not designed correctly by your mechanical team to control CFM, every single little intricacy of that, then it doesn't really matter that you spend all this money on filling the whole house with some kind of furniture fabric that doesn't off gas, and because your walls are breathing. Like, it focus on control. It's everything. It really is everything, because once you've created that perfect envelope, once you've created that perfect piece to control, then the DNA of the house can start to be refined and to a meaningful metric, to a meaningful standard.
That's awesome. Focus on control. Well, thank you, Rick. This has been excellent. I love how you're blending operations, building science, and human health. It's a really different angle that you just don't really see much, I guess. You don't just build it to code and call it a day, which is really interesting. But before we close out, Rick, where should people connect with you? Maybe a website or LinkedIn?
Yeah, if they're looking at building in the North Lake region, we have danwebbbuilders.com, constantly being updated. You can always look us up there. And then Stomata is the same place, or it's actually stomatabss.com, building science services. Other than that, I have a LinkedIn, but I'm not much of a social media cat. I'm told I should be more, but brain is in different avenues. So yeah, I've had a great time. Oh, I'm glad you reached out. I'd love to talk to you again. There's plenty more to talk about. So thanks for having me on. I think what you're doing is awesome as well. So I just want to say that officially. I'm really excited for your future in this world, and of podcasting and what you have going on outside of that as well.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that, truly. For everybody listening, though, thanks for tuning in to The Intelligent Builder. If you found this episode valuable, make sure to share with another builder or founder in your circle, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Rick.
It's you.